Morning. I got punched in the face. You should too. Alright. I didn't get punched in the face yesterday. I didn't get punched in the face last week. But I've been punched in the face in my life many times. Starting at probably age 9. Right? Kind of when things got worse. Bullying and things like that. I was doing some sparring at Zinni's gym even in 2022, right, when I used to work there. Boxing and kickboxing. I'd spar with the different students, and, we put boxing gloves on, you get popped in the face. Sometimes it was because the punch coming at me was better than I was at the moment. Sometimes it was because I was sparring, someone who had a little bit less experience, a little bit less ability or physicality than me, or they could have been much younger, and I kind of went easy, and they surprised me during that, because I kind of dumbed my defense down. You get punched in the face, right? There are lots of martial artists that just haven't been punched in the face full force by someone that could hurt them, and I find those guys and girls, I find those people often very condemning of other martial arts. I kind of have a beef with the Shotokan people and certain uber traditional or what they think is traditional Japanese martial artists, right? There's a guy named Hayashi on the internet. He has a dojo in Germany. He put videos up years ago, and I don't know what he's doing these days, but he was very denigrating of what he called American kickboxing, breakdancing, gymnastics. He was denigrating basically American karate, by extension all American martial arts, and he's like, well, first of all, there's tons of American styles that do not have a kickboxing format and that don't do, tricks and gymnastics and breakdancing. So he's either ignorant, Hayashi, you're either ignorant or lying. All right? I'll say it to your face if you're here. It's stupid. There's this belief amongst many martial artists who kind of don't understand the history of their own style. This belief that if there is a change, it is a form of deviation and perversion, which is funny because if you're practicing an art called karate instead of tode or ti, right, or Okinawan Kempo or Ryukyu Kempo, that you've actually not practicing anything like the original art. And if you're wearing a belt, and if you have black belt degrees, and if you're lining up in rows and performing sort of militaristic linear drills up and down the dojo, that's kind of not how it was taught. If your art does not include kobudo, that's not how it was taught. If you're doing kicks above the waist and face kicks, that's not. In other words, change can be improvement, innovation. It can be a divergence in exploration. Often it is all of those, but it kind of starts with exploration. It is not. If all change from tradition is a perversion, then Shotokan, Shito-ryu, Goju-ryu are perversions, especially the Japanese version. If we take that thesis to be true, which I do not, I tend to view them as explorations and innovations. That's what human beings do. But, Americans, much more than the Japanese, especially when these arts began to come to America in the 50s and 60s, are very concerned about getting punched in the face. It's a thing that happens a lot here. Right? To this day. And if you haven't been punched in the face, maybe repeatedly, you don't know. There's things that happen psychologically. It's a problem that you want solved. It's a problem I want solved. It's why, even though I was put in martial arts and didn't like it, I had a weird love-hate, push-pull relationship with martial arts. The teacher, the head teacher, Katsuya Kisaka of the JK in Trenton on Older Nav, was kind of a harsh teacher. He was a rough guy, right? And the training was difficult. And so, being a little kid, I was used to watching cartoons on Saturday. I was like, wow, I don't know if I like this. There's parts of this I don't like. But then watching him in front of class, I was like, I want to be like that. I want to achieve that at his level, right? And so it was a push-pull. And, later what I got pulled out, and what I discovered later was, A, my self-training, I got something out of that, and B, when I began to train in other styles, methods, and teachers, I, was like, wow, here's the way I can do this that suits me, that improves me, and helps me, right? And I get to accomplish the things I want, and then later I began to study other styles. I have a black belt in Taekwondo from the ATA, which, I called them a neo-traditionalist organization, and I got that in the 90s, 91. When Grandmaster H.U. Lee was alive, his signature is on my first dance certificate. I began to learn boxing. I be Filipino martial arts, Kung Fu. I have master's ranks and black sashes in various Kung Fu styles, right? And I found that suits me, right? But to me, those aren't perversions in my life. Those are explorations, deviations, innovations, and discoveries, right? And so, another thing is, this Hayashi guy was sort of upset about people awarding them, they award themselves 10th dans in American kickboxing breakdancing. Again, there's no style called that. So it's like calling someone the N-word or calling someone a biatch or the C word, right? It's not truth, it's counterfactual, and it manipulates people's perceptions via language. Hayashi, that's a very disingenuous thing. And, one of the precepts, Funakoshi's 20 precepts, is, I think, somewhere in there, you should be an honest person, right? So, how's that for a perversion, right? There is that provincial attitude of many Asians, Orientals, whatever you want to use. I'm not a politically correct person. I'm kind of tired of it, right? That no non-Japanese, for example, can ever, master this art. He said, well, if it's not, he talked about the Japanese formatting of a certificate, how if it's not put that way, it's not really valid. It's as if he doesn't understand that formats of writing change from context to context, right? Here's another kicker. Gichin Funakoshi's level, he was awarded a 5th dan. I don't think he tested for it. At some point, governing board, probably in Okinawa, awarded him that rank, right? And for a while, when he died, Shotokan people were like, no one should be higher than his level, but then that was quickly dispensed with. So according to that practice, Teruyuki Okazaki, Hidetaka Nishiyama, Oishima, Nakayama, then they're all perverts, they're all deviants from the true tradition. But here's a kicker. The whole cue and dance system is not from martial arts. It was invented by human beings for the game of Go, a board game. And the Dan rankings were for professional players, right? So it's as if, it's as if, I don't know, like a video game title, you have achieved the next level, right? Was just given to a different activity, right? Another innovation or exploration was the development of sport martial arts, which didn't exist in Okinawa karate. You could even argue that Okinawan karate is a deviation or a perversion of actual Chinese boxing, right? You could go far and wide and be ridiculous with this. But for most of us who decided to stay in the martial arts, we're like, I don't like getting punched in the face, and it happens too much for my liking, right? A lot of martial arts custom and courtesy, a lot of practices are avoidance behaviors, right? Or based on ignorance. For example, if you look at many Shotokan, some Japanese styles. The way they train their stance, their hands are held really low. There's kind of a wider stance than many people would adopt if they were fighting a more mobile opponent. The rules, and that's because the rules don't allow repeated punches, full contact punches to the face. They don't allow, strong grappling, ground grappling. They for sure don't allow leg kicks. A lot of these stances Shotokan people adopt. If you knew leg kicks, you would eat them alive, right? And they're like, well, this is what the true art is. And you definitely see it in Chinese martial arts. Let's not have illusions. There's many Chinese martial artists that couldn't fight their way out of a wet paper bag, right? If you are practicing a warrior way and tracing yourself back to samurai lineages and battlefield warriors and brave heroes, and after 10 years of training you would suffer a catastrophic failure if faced by a novice Muay Thai guy, or taken to the ground, if you would experience a catastrophic personal failure that may result in permanent debilitating injury after 10 years of training, well, man, you've achieved all this enlightenment and personal discipline, but what good would it do you in that moment? Right? And we live in chaotic times in America. We're very divided. It's hard for people to see the middle ground or have even an argument. Most arguments here turn into like something worse than an argument. Okay? Lifelong enmity. We can't even have arguments, let alone civil discussions, right? And there is violence. There's the threat of violence hanging around, and some of the thought leaders like Jordan Peterson, like, well, it's just normal that between men, he sort of implies that threat of violence is there in every conversation, and that's why women can't get the respect of men. I don't know. It's always like some pencil neck guy like Jordan Peterson who's very weepy and drug addicted and mentally ill, who sort of talks that way. I've had plenty of conversations that got disrespectful where I knew it wasn't going to get physical. So did the other guy, right? From New Jersey, we sort of make verbal sparring an art form. We're all like 10th dons in verbal sparring sometimes, right? But many martial artists like Hayashi, martial artists like some of these tradition-bound people, and many of those Chinese masters that, haven't laced up gloves or gotten down on the ground or rolled in their lives, proclaiming themselves undefeatable grand masters. You hear me, Chinese martial artists. They couldn't handle. Their behaviors are avoidance behaviors. Their defense against rapid boxing combinations thrown with murderous intent or leg kicks is to simply never face it in training, and never face it in competition, never face it in, even sometimes members of one style or school might get together with another formally or informally and say, let's test our stuff out, right? In other words, their practice of martial arts is lifelong avoidance behaviors of practicing their art in a way that would teach them, force them, enable them to be able to function against the threats that exist in the world, right? You don't have to abandon your art. I think this modern day rediscovery of the application of obscure movements and forms and trying to make them practical, like Ian Abernathy does, and some of the I've seen some of the Wing Chun people and some of the Hungar people making moves in that direction, right? Where instead of having to rely on more of a kickboxing format, they're actually learning how to apply their techniques in competition, in sparring, in situational self-defense, functional training, right? To call yourself a budoka, right? A martial artist, a scholar warrior, right? And not be able to war, not, again, being the kind of person that would suffer catastrophic failure if hard pressure was applied in a realistic manner to you in contexts and situations that exist in the real world. You're a paper tiger, and you've been avoiding the reality that getting punched in the face can be devastating, that it's a problem, right? And the martial arts is rife with that, and that builds this arrogant, exclusionary, provincial attitude that I see in some of these videos, right? I've been punched in the face. That's one of my best qualifications. I'm like, yo, man, I've been punched in the face. I've been slammed. I've been taken down. I've been in sparring matches that turned into freaking wars, right? I've been in situations where from the moment I entered a building or social setting to when I left, people were bullying me and eyeing me and denigrating me, maybe because I was the perceived wrong race, right? That's happened to me many times. I've been punched in the face. I'm no master, I'm no grandmaster, but that's what I've been through. And if you haven't been through it, or if you haven't tried to replicate these conditions in training, in essence, you're exhibiting a form of cowardice. You're convincing yourself you're a brave, intrepid warrior, but you haven't actually trained for the war that you might face. And you talk about, well, I teach people to avoid war. I teach people to avoid dangerous situations. Yes. But if you're avoiding a situation because you know you can handle it and you're afraid of what you can do, that's enlightenment. If you're avoiding a situation because you have no choice but you're acting like you're brave and enlightened, you're a bit of a buffoon, right? And if you've been in the martial arts 8 years, 5 years, decade, 20 years, and you've never been punched in the face, and you've never, man, go find someone that teaches and trains that way and add that to what you do, right? If you're calling yourself a martial artist, if you're calling yourself an authority on self-defense, yeah, I got punched in the face. You should too.